The coin machine at the corner laundromat groaned, almost in protest, as Emma Valdez slipped in her final quarter. She watched the tired, metallic drum swallow the coin, clicked a few times, and finally came to a halt, signaling that it had done its job. Her small laundry load began to spin slowly, the soapy water sloshing inside. She exhaled, the kind of breath that carried a day's worth of exhaustion. Outside, dusk crept over Chelsea, Massachusetts. The worn streets glistened slightly from the drizzle earlier, streetlights flickering to life like hesitant stars. Emma, 13 years old, sat on the plastic bench next to the washers, a canvas tote by her side holding school books and leftover toast from lunch wrapped in napkin. She hadn't eaten dinner, not yet, maybe not tonight. In her coat pocket were 3 quarters and a crumpled $5 bill. The quarters were for tomorrow's bus rides. The $5? That would be handed to her mother, like always. If her mother asked, Emma would say she spent her school lunch money. It was easier that way. The laundromat's owner, Mr. Din, gave her a small nod from the counter. He was used to seeing her at this hour. Every Tuesday. Every load done with precision. Smallest cycle, cheapest soap. He never said much, but once he slipped her an orange and whispered, "Don't let the hard days steal your sweetness." She hadn't understood it then. Maybe she still didn't. Her phone buzzed. A cracked screen lit up with a message from her classmate Ava. "Are you coming to the school play tonight?" Emma's thumb hovered over the keyboard. She almost replied, "Can't. Laundry. Mom's waiting." But instead, she turned the phone off. She didn't want to explain. She had stopped trying to explain a long time ago. A loud voice burst through the silence as the door slammed open. Emma's mother, Linda Valdez, stood at the entrance. Hair disheveled, eyes bloodshot, and lips curled into a familiar scowl. "There you are," she barked. "You took the damn detergent with you again?" Emma stood quickly, her back straight. "I thought you said you weren't doing laundry tonight." Her mother rolled her eyes, stepped in with shaky legs. The air around her smelled like cheap beer and stale perfume. "Well, I changed my mind. And I needed the damn soap." Emma fumbled in the bag, pulling out the near-empty bottle. "Here. There's still some left." Linda snatched it and turned to leave. But she stopped halfway and looked at her daughter with disdain. "You waste more money washing those dumb uniforms and books than I do playing cards. At least I'm trying to win something." Emma didn't respond. She never did during moments like this. Linda stared a second longer. "And don't be late. You gotta help me clean the apartment before tomorrow. Joanne's coming over for poker." Emma nodded silently. The door slammed shut again. The hum of the machines filled the void. But inside her chest, Emma felt a louder kind of silence. Back at their small second-floor apartment on Broadway Street, Emma turned the key as quietly as possible. The hallway light was flickering again. She tiptoed past the living room, where her mother was asleep on the couch with the TV still buzzing. Empty bottles on the floor, ashtray full. She walked into her bedroom, more of a converted storage space, and placed her bag on the floor. Her back ached, not from the physical weight of her books, but from everything else she had to carry. There was a pile of unopened letters on her desk, utility bills, warnings. She already knew the power might be cut soon if they didn't pay. Again. Emma pulled out her geometry homework, but could barely focus. Her eyes were burning, her hands trembling from fatigue. She wanted to cry, scream, or run somewhere no one knew her. But instead, she opened her notebook and started solving the first problem. Escape, for now, meant shapes and formulas. The next morning, Emma stopped by the corner store on her way to school. She took the $5 bill from her pocket and bought a loaf of bread and a cup of instant noodles. That left her with 72 cents. She counted it twice, heart thudding as she realized it wasn't enough for the bus. So she walked. 40 minutes across cracked sidewalks, weaving through cars, cold wind biting at her cheeks. She arrived late. Again. But when she walked into the classroom, Miss Harper, her English teacher, gave her a knowing smile instead of a reprimand. Ms. Harper always smiled at her like that. Like she knew the secret battles Emma was fighting. "Class, settle down. Miss Harper called. Let's start with a writing prompt. I want each of you to write a letter to someone you admire, someone who shaped your life. Emma froze. She didn't have anyone like that. No one to write to. Her pen hovered above the paper. Then, slowly, she began to write. Dear future me. I don't know who you'll be yet. I don't know if you'll make it out of here. But I hope you're safe. I hope you sleep in a quiet house and don't have to count coins every night. I hope you have real friends and someone to eat dinner with. If you're reading this, it means we didn't give up. So don't forget who we were. Even if no one else remembers. That night, Emma came home to darkness. The electricity was out. Her mother wasn't home yet. Probably at some dive bar or poker game. Emma lit the small emergency candle she kept hidden. She sat at the kitchen table and made 2 sandwiches, one for herself, one for her mother, though she knew hers might be thrown away. She looked around their cramped kitchen and thought of Miss Harper's assignment, the one she hadn't finished yet. She pulled out her notebook and read the letter again. And for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, one day, she would leave this behind. That one day, the girl counting coins at a laundromat in Chelsea would become someone she could be proud of. Even if no one else ever said it. Even if her mother never did. Emma's shoes were soaked by the time she reached the school gates. A thin layer of ice from the early morning frost had begun to melt, leaving puddles that seeped into her sneakers with each step. It didn't matter. She had worn the same pair since the start of the school year, and the soles had long lost their grip. Inside the school building, warmth greeted her like an unfamiliar embrace. The radiators clanked noisily, old and overworked, but they did their job. Emma paused by her locker, brushing strands of wet hair from her face. She didn't have an umbrella. Again. She never remembered to bring one, and even if she did, it was likely broken or already claimed by her mother for another use. She opened her locker and was hit with a wave of anxiety. The English essay was due today. She had stayed up last night in the dark, using a flashlight under the covers until her hands went numb. She had finished it barely. Scrawled in pencil, the pages now sat in her binder, wrinkled and slightly smudged. As she tucked the essay into her folder, a loud laugh echoed down the hallway. Hey, Valdez, someone shouted. Emma turned slowly. It was Troy Henderson, a junior with too much money and not enough empathy. He was flanked by his usual group of followers, boys who wore varsity jackets like armor and laughed a little too loud at jokes that weren't funny. Did you bring your laundry this time? Troy grinned, holding up a Tide Pod like it was a trophy. Thought maybe you'd need this for second period. The hallway filled with snickers. Emma's throat tightened. She didn't say anything. She had learned that silence was her safest weapon. Words only made things worse. Troy waited, clearly expecting a retort, but when she looked away, bored and unaffected, he frowned. You're no fun, he muttered, tossing the Tide Pod in the trash before swaggering off. When they disappeared around the corner, Emma released a slow breath. Her hands were shaking again. Not from fear, but from the effort it took to stay calm. In English class, Miss Harper collected the essays with her usual encouraging smile. Thank you, Emma, she said softly as she took the wrinkled pages. You've always had a strong voice in your writing. Emma blinked at her, caught off guard. Really? Miss Harper nodded. You write with weight. Like someone who's seen more than she should. Emma didn't know what to say. She mumbled a thank you and returned to her seat. As the class began a new discussion on of mice and men, Emma drifted in and out, her eyes locked on the window. Outside, the sky was still gray. The clouds hung low like thick wool blankets. Somewhere beyond them, the sun was trying to break through, but it hadn't yet. At lunch, Emma sat at her usual spot, far corner of the cafeteria, next to the vending machines. It wasn't that she didn't want friends. It was just easier this way. She didn't have to explain why she couldn't afford lunch some days, or why she sometimes wore the same hoodie 3 days in a row. Today's lunch was the other half of the sandwich from last night. The bread had gone a little stale, but it still filled her stomach. As she ate, someone approached. Hey, said a soft voice. Emma looked up. It was Ava Chin. They used to be close, best friends in middle school. But somewhere along the way, Emma had pulled away. Life at home had grown darker. And pretending to be normal had become exhausting. I saved you a seat today, Ava said, motioning toward her table, where a few other girls from their science class sat chatting. If you want to join. Emma hesitated. She almost said no, the way she always did. But today felt different. She looked at her sandwich. Then at Ava's kind eyes. Maybe tomorrow? Ava smiled. Okay, tomorrow then. After school, Emma went straight to the diner on 3rd Street where she worked part-time. The shift was short, just 3 hours bussing tables and refilling coffee for tired customers, but it meant $25 in cash. Sometimes more with tips. She changed into her apron quickly and greeted her manager, Carlos, who handed her a dishcloth. You look tired, he said, not unkindly. Emma nodded. Just school. He tilted his head. You sure you want to keep working during exams? I can cut a few shifts. Emma shook her head quickly. No, I need it. Carlos gave her a long look, then sighed. All right, but let me know if it's too much. She smiled faintly and got to work. As she cleared tables and wiped down booths, the rhythm of the job soothed her. There was something comforting about order. Plates, cups, napkins, things that could be cleaned and put in their place. Unlike her life. By the time she got home, it was almost 9 p.m. The apartment was quiet. That worried her. Her mother was unpredictable. Quiet could mean passed out or angry. Emma stepped in carefully. The smell of cigarettes was strong. In the living room, Linda sat on the couch, staring at a muted game show on the TV. She didn't turn when Emma entered. I didn't win today, she said suddenly. Emma paused. Sorry to hear that. Linda laughed bitterly. What are you sorry for? You think you're better than me, don't you? With your books and your honors classes. You think that gets you anywhere. Emma's jaw clenched. I don't think I'm better. I'm trying. Linda turned to face her, eyes sharp. Trying to leave me behind, huh? Think I don't see it. Emma's voice was quiet, but steady. I'm just trying to survive. Linda snorted and reached for a bottle hidden under the table. Emma went to her room. She closed the door behind her and pressed her back against it. The shadows in her life weren't always loud. Sometimes they whispered. Sometimes they just sat there on a couch, drinking from a bottle, pretending not to care. But Emma cared. Too much. And maybe that was what made it harder. The morning after the fight, the apartment felt like a graveyard. Emma moved quietly through the kitchen, careful not to clatter the mugs as she reached for the instant coffee jar. Her mother was still asleep on the couch, snoring softly, the TV still on from the night before. The game show host's frozen smile stared from the screen, muted and eerie. Emma didn't bother with breakfast. She had grown used to hunger, not the sharp, stabbing kind, but the dull, sinking sort that clung to her ribs like a forgotten bruise. Instead, she poured hot water over the instant coffee, took a sip, and slipped out the door before the sun had fully risen. The walk to school was long and cold, but she didn't mind. The air was crisp. And with each step, she could feel the weight of the apartment drifting off her shoulders. School, for all its challenges, was still the only place where she felt like she existed as something more than her mother's daughter. The first bell had barely rung when Miss Harper spotted her in the hallway. Emma, can I see you for a moment? Emma turned, heart skipping. Did I forget another assignment? Was my essay not good enough? She followed Miss Harper into the empty classroom, where a thick envelope sat on the teacher's desk. It came this morning, Miss Harper said, her voice almost giddy. From Boston University. Emma blinked. I didn't apply to BU yet. I was still saving for the application fee. Miss Harper smiled. I sent it for you. I spoke with the guidance counselor, and we submitted your writing samples and academic record. You're one of the strongest students I've ever taught. Emma's eyes widened. You did that. Miss Harper nodded. They've offered you a full scholarship, Emma. Tuition, books, housing, everything. It's called the Phoenix Grant. For students who rise from difficult circumstances. Emma stared at the envelope as if it were made of fire. I don't know what to say. Say you'll go, MS. Harper said softly. Say you'll give yourself this chance. Emma swallowed hard. Her throat burned. She took the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside, the letter was printed on elegant paper with embossed gold lettering. She read it twice, then a third time, unable to believe it. She was in. She was going to college. At lunch, she sat alone again. But this time she didn't mind. She was too stunned, too full of emotion to share it with anyone yet. She traced the school crest on the letterhead with her finger. Boston University. A place she had dreamed about since the 6th grade. For the first time in years, hope didn't feel like a dangerous thing. It felt warm. Real. But when the final bell rang and the sun dipped low behind the school buildings, reality crept back in. She would have to tell her mother. Emma arrived home early. The letter carefully tucked into the inner pocket of her jacket. Her hands were sweaty, heart racing. She walked into the apartment and found her mother sitting at the kitchen table with a cigarette and an open stack of scratch tickets. None of them were winners. Where've you been? Linda muttered without looking up. School, Emma replied, voice steady. I have something to tell you. Linda scoffed. If it's another award, save it. Awards don't pay rent. Emma pulled out the letter and laid it on the table. I got a scholarship. To Boston University. Full ride. I won't have to pay anything. Her mother picked up the letter, squinting at the fancy font. What does that mean, huh? That you're leaving? That you think you're too good for this place? It means I can get out, Emma said, louder than she meant to. It means I can finally build something. For me. Linda stared at her, eyes narrow. College ain't everything, Emma. You'll come back broke and disappointed. You think that degree's gonna fix you? Emma felt a wave of heat rise to her face. No, but maybe it'll fix what you broke. The words hung in the air like shattered glass. Linda flinched, just a little. Then her lips curled into a sneer. You think I wanted this life? Your dad walked out and left me with nothing. I did what I had to do. You think I was born broken? No, I was made this way. Emma didn't yell. She didn't cry. She simply picked up the letter. I'm still going, she said, and walked into her room. That night, she packed a box under her bed, just a few books, her journal, and the BU letter. She hadn't officially accepted yet, but her soul already had. She lay on her mattress staring at the ceiling, listening to the buzz of the dying kitchen light and her mother's angry muttering behind the door. And still, somewhere deep inside, she smiled. She had gotten in. She was going to leave. She was going to become someone she could be proud of, even if no one else would ever say it. The day of graduation arrived with the smell of cut grass and the buzz of June warmth in the air. Students milled around the high school auditorium in polished shoes and pressed gowns, faces flushed with excitement. Parents carried bouquets, cameras clicked in every direction, and laughter echoed off the walls like music. Emma Valdez stood in front of the mirror in the school's bathroom, adjusting the maroon-colored graduation robe draped over her shoulders. Her reflection looked unfamiliar, almost too clean, too hopeful. The sash around her neck read valedictorian, and a medallion gleamed beneath her collarbone. She should have been proud. She should have felt something. But all she could feel was the hollow space where someone should have been standing beside her. No mother in the audience. No flowers. No warm hug before she walked the stage. Just silence. Earlier that morning, she had tried one last time. She had come home the night before and placed her graduation invitation on the kitchen table, beneath the coffee mug that Linda always used. A simple card with golden trim and a line that read, "You are cordially invited to the graduation ceremony of Emma Valdez, class of 20XX, valedictorian." She had written below it in careful cursive, "Starts at 10 a.m. Ms. Harper saved you a seat. Please come." That morning, she awoke early, curled her hair, and slipped on the only dress shoes she owned, scuffed at the sides, but polished with borrowed cleaner from the diner. Linda never mentioned the invitation. When Emma passed her in the kitchen, her mother was nursing a beer and scratching at another lottery ticket. Emma paused at the door, holding her breath. "I'm graduating today," she said softly. Linda didn't look up. Good for you. Does it come with a paycheck? Emma's lips parted, but the words died in her throat. She stared for 1 second longer, then quietly closed the door behind her. Now, in the auditorium, Emma clutched her speech with both hands. She took her place in the front row, surrounded by classmates whose families waved from the audience like flags of celebration. She spotted Ava and her parents near the front, all beaming with pride. Behind them, even Troy Henderson was getting a standing ovation from his dad. Emma's eyes scanned the seats. No one. Row after row, seat after seat, empty of anyone who might have come for her. Still, she stood when her name was called. Still, she walked tall across the stage. Still, she took the podium when it was time to deliver her speech. She looked out at the sea of faces, not one of them hers. Then she took a breath. Good morning. My name is Emma Valdez. I stand here today as your valedictorian, not because I'm the smartest or the most talented, but because I refuse to quit. Some of us came here with parents who sat through every recital, every science fair, every late-night panic over grades. And some of us didn't. Some of us studied by candlelight, worked shifts after school, and walked to class on empty stomachs. We came from silence, from chaos, from the kind of homes that don't appear in school brochures. But we're still here. To those of you who had someone to cheer you on, hold them close. To those who didn't, be proud anyway. You are your own light. And to my future self, wherever you end up, I hope you never forget where you came from. Not to be ashamed, but to remember how far you had to climb. Thank you. The auditorium stood silent for a beat. Then applause erupted. Ms. Harper was on her feet, eyes glassy. Ava wiped a tear. Even a few teachers clapped harder than they should have. Emma bowed her head. But inside, she felt both triumphant and utterly alone. After the ceremony, while friends gathered for photos and hugs, Emma stood at the edge of the courtyard, diploma in hand, alone again. She wanted to go home, but she couldn't bear the thought of walking into that apartment today. Not after everything. So she walked. She walked to the library, to the diner, to the edge of the river where she used to read books as a child when home felt too small to breathe. She sat on the bench and pulled out her phone. A new message blinked. Ms. Harper, you were brilliant. I'm proud of you. Emma stared at the screen for a long time. Then she typed slowly. Emma, thank you. I needed that today. As the sun dipped low, Emma finally returned home. Linda was on the couch again, a drink in her hand, TV flickering. She didn't look up. Emma stood there in her robe, diploma still in her hand. I graduated, she said quietly. Linda lit a cigarette. You already said that. Emma nodded. She turned and walked to her room, pausing just before the door. And no, she added, it doesn't come with a paycheck. But it comes with a future. She didn't wait for a reply. There wasn't one. But for the first time, it didn't crush her. Because today, she had stood on a stage alone and didn't fall. Boston buzzed like a different world. The city's heartbeat pulsed through pavement and subway lines, through the chatter of strangers and the echo of sirens. Emma Valdez stood in front of Warren Hall, the freshman dorms at Boston University. Her suitcase in one hand and her acceptance letter clutched like a passport in the other. She had made it. Somehow, despite every broken piece of her upbringing, despite her mother's silence and the poverty that clung to her like shadow, she had carved her way to this doorstep. But the dream didn't come with soft beds and easy mornings. Her first night in the dorm, Emma barely slept. The mattress was too soft, the room too clean. Her roommate, Chloe, was already asleep, earbuds in, an expensive MacBook still glowing beside her. Emma stared at the ceiling, thinking of the tiny, noisy apartment back in Chelsea. The peeling paint. The smell of smoke and beer that clung to her clothes. The silence that was never peaceful, only bitter. This silence felt different. It was unfamiliar, but it didn't hurt. Still, sleep didn't come. She rose at dawn, laced up her worn-out sneakers, and walked half an hour to a nearby diner where she had applied the week before. The manager, an older woman named Jeannie, had been skeptical when Emma said she could balance college and work. But Emma had shown up every day since orientation week, volunteering to start early, stay late, do whatever was needed. Today was her first paid shift. By 6 a.m., Emma was wiping down counters and greeting early risers with a practiced smile. "Coffee?" she asked an elderly man reading the Globe. He nodded, barely looking up. Emma poured the cup, then moved to the next table. The motion soothed her. Clean, simple, repetitive. Every order she took felt like an affirmation. "You're doing this. You're surviving." By 9 a.m., she clocked out, changed in the diner's restroom, and jogged back toward campus for her first class, Introduction to Microeconomics. In her notebook, she wrote down everything, even the jokes the professor made. She couldn't afford to miss a thing. She was here on a scholarship, and in her mind, every mistake meant a door quietly closing behind her. That afternoon, she checked her email and found a reply from a campus job board. Subject: Application for Student Library Assistant. Emma clicked it open. "Dear Emma Valdez, thank you for your application. We'd like to offer you a part-time evening position at Muger Memorial Library. Shifts will be Monday through Friday, 6 to 9 p.m. Please reply to confirm availability." Her eyes widened. 2 jobs. 1 day. It was crazy. It was perfect. By 6 p.m., Emma was behind the checkout desk at the library, sorting returns and learning the system. The scent of old books filled the air, and the hush of the building felt like a lullaby compared to the clatter of dishes at the diner. She liked it here. The quiet made her feel safe. Her hands moved quickly, efficiently. She smiled at students who approached her, even when they didn't smile back. There was a deep sense of pride growing in her chest, not loud or flashy, but solid and warm. By the time she returned to her dorm at 9:30, her feet ached and her shoulders slumped, but her spirit remained lit. Chloe looked up from her laptop as Emma entered. "Hey," she said. "You okay? You've been gone all day." Emma nodded, kicking off her shoes. 2 jobs. Chloe blinked. "Why? Isn't tuition covered?" "Yeah," Emma said, peeling off her diner apron. "But books aren't. Food isn't. Life isn't." Chloe didn't reply. Emma didn't expect her to. They came from different galaxies, she and Chloe. But that was okay. She didn't need understanding. She needed survival. Later, as she brushed her teeth, her phone buzzed. Mom flashed across the screen. Emma stared at the name. Her thumb hovered, debating. Finally, she swiped to answer. "Yeah." There was silence. Then, "You send money this week?" "No hello. No congratulations." Emma exhaled slowly. "Not yet. I started working. It'll take time." Linda snorted on the other end. "Don't forget where you came from." Emma's jaw tightened. "I haven't," she said. "That's why I'm here." She hung up before her mother could say more. That night, Emma sat by the window with her laptop open. She pulled up her online banking. The balance read $51.24. She transferred $25 to her mother's account. The rest she kept. She closed her eyes. It wasn't enough, but it was something. And somewhere between her exhaustion and her determination, Emma realized this life, this pain, this struggle was still hers. And she would own every second of it. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks of blisters forming and fading from the back of Emma's heels. 3 weeks of catching naps between lectures and shifts, of burning through textbooks at midnight, of brewing coffee so often that the scent followed her into dreams. Her routine had become a rhythm, a relentless, pounding beat, but it kept her moving forward. She hadn't heard from her mother again. Until that morning, Emma opened her dorm mailbox out of habit. Bills, club flyers, and university announcements spilled out like usual. But something else was tucked at the back. A letter. Handwritten. No return address. Her breath caught in her throat as she pulled it out and saw her name. Emma Valdez. Boston University, Warren Hall. Her mother's handwriting was unmistakable, loopy. A little messy, a touch of old-school flair. Emma hadn't seen it in years, not since report cards were mailed home instead of emailed. She stared at the envelope, fingers trembling. Part of her wanted to rip it open immediately. Another part wanted to toss it in the trash and never look back. But curiosity always won. Back in her dorm room, Emma sat on her bed, turning the envelope over slowly. She peeled the flap open and unfolded the paper inside. It wasn't long. Just a few lines. Emma, there's no heat again. The neighbors are complaining. And I can't get the guy to fix the radiator. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. The landlord's useless. If you can send something soon, that'd help. Mom. That was it. No, how are you? No, I miss you. No, I'm proud of you. Just cold facts and a request for money. Emma stared at the letter for a long time, her heart a storm of emotions. She wasn't surprised. This was their pattern. Her mother reached out when she needed something, never when Emma needed her. Still, a knot formed in her chest. The kind that came from memories she couldn't erase of sleeping under coats in the winter, of huddling close to the oven when the heat went out, of waking up with fingers numb. She couldn't ignore that. She never could. That evening, after her library shift, Emma sat in the quiet reading room, laptop open, calculator beside her. She had become her own accountant, budgeting every dollar, every hour of her life. She stared at the numbers. Rent, covered by her scholarship. Meal plan, almost gone for the month. Tips from the diner, $83. Library pay pending. Remaining funds after groceries and books, $34.11. She could send 20. Not more. Not if she wanted to eat. Still, 20 was better than nothing. She opened her banking app and began the transfer. But halfway through, she stopped. A thought surfaced, uninvited but clear. If I send it, will she use it for food? Or will it disappear into a poker machine? Her fingers hovered above the screen. Then she did something she had never done before. She closed the app. Back in her dorm room, Chloe was out. Emma lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling, the envelope still beside her. She picked it up again and flipped it over. Her mother's handwriting looked shakier than she remembered. Was it age? Was it something worse? For the first time in a long while, Emma didn't feel anger. She felt grief. Not for what was lost, but for what never was. She folded the letter and tucked it into the back of her notebook. Then she opened her journal and wrote, "Today I received a letter from home. Not a how are you, not a you're doing great. Just a need. Just another reminder that I'm never seen as a daughter. Only as a provider. Still, I couldn't throw it away. Because deep down, I still want her to see me. To say one day, 'You did well, Emma.' To say, 'I'm proud.' But I know now I have to be proud of myself first." Later that night, Emma walked down to the mailbox again. She pulled out a sheet of notebook paper and began to write her own letter. "Mom, I got your note. I'm sorry the heat's out again. I'll send something when I can. But right now I have to make sure I can keep things going here, too. Classes are tough. Work is nonstop. I'm doing okay. Tired, but okay. Just thought you should know that. Emma." She sealed the envelope, addressed it, and slipped it into the outgoing mail slot. It wasn't everything her mother needed, but it was all she had to give. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Snow had arrived early that year. Boston was wrapped in soft white by the first week of December. Students wore wool scarves and clutched coffee cups with gloved fingers as they rushed across icy sidewalks between exams and last-minute study sessions. Christmas lights twinkled from dorm windows, glowing reds and greens cutting through the gray of winter. Emma Valdez sat at the back table of the Muger Library, finishing her final paper on behavioral economics. Her eyes burned from hours staring at her laptop screen, and her back ached from leaning too long over textbooks. But she was almost done. Just one more citation. Just one more conclusion paragraph. She typed with frozen fingertips, trying to ignore the hum of Christmas music filtering faintly through the vents. She loved the sound, but it always hurt this time of year. She still remembered Christmases from her childhood, not the kind with gifts and warm cookies. But the kind where dinner was instant ramen and the only decorations were the leftover lights stolen from a neighbor's trash. Linda would be too busy at the bar or trying to double her money at some basement poker game. Emma would sit by the window and look at the stars, pretending each one was a gift waiting to be unwrapped. She used to draw Christmas trees on notebook paper and tape them to the wall. That was all they had. Now, at 19, Emma had her own walls. But they were bare too. Her dorm room wasn't decorated. Chloe had gone home early for the break, leaving behind a cheerful miniature tree with blinking lights, a plate of gingerbread cookies, and a note taped to the mirror. Take one. You've earned it, warrior girl. Chloe. Emma had smiled at that. But she didn't take a cookie. Somehow, it felt like borrowing a joy she hadn't paid for. December 24th. The city emptied out. Most of the dorms were silent, lights off, windows dark. Emma was among the few who stayed behind. She couldn't afford a flight home, and even if she could, she didn't know what would be waiting for her in Chelsea. A locked door? A drunk mother? A freezing apartment? No thank you. Instead, she pulled a shift at the diner that night, covering for a coworker who wanted to be with her kids. Jeannie, the manager, gave her a long look when she showed up in uniform. You sure about this, Emma? It's Christmas Eve. Emma smiled. It's just another night. But they both knew that wasn't true. The diner was nearly empty. A lonely man in a suit ate turkey dinner by himself, scrolling through his phone. A homeless woman came in for warmth and a cup of water. Emma gave her a sandwich from the kitchen and pretended it was a mistake. She didn't want to make it a big deal. Kindness, she had learned, was more powerful when quiet. By 10:30 p.m., snow was falling thick again outside. The street lamps cast golden halos on the sidewalks, and the city looked beautiful in the way only empty cities do. Jeannie locked the register, counted bills, and handed Emma a small envelope. What's this? Emma asked. Your holiday bonus. It's not much, but it's something. Emma opened the envelope. Inside was a $50 bill and a handwritten note. Emma, thank you for keeping this place going with that unbreakable spine of yours. Merry Christmas. Jeannie. Emma didn't know what to say. She blinked back the sting in her eyes. Thank you, she whispered. When she stepped outside, the cold bit her cheeks, but she didn't mind. She pulled her scarf tighter and walked slowly through the snow-blanketed streets back toward campus. She paused at a small convenience store still open, stepped inside, and stared at the shelves. She didn't need anything, but she wanted something. Something just for herself. In the back corner, tucked between expired decorations and leftover candy canes, she found a tiny green tree, plastic. About a foot tall, with 3 plastic ornaments and a strand of battery-powered lights. It cost $6.49. Emma bought it. For once, she didn't calculate or rationalize. She just paid. Back in her dorm, she placed the tree on her desk, turned off the overhead lights, and sat on the edge of her bed. The tree blinked softly, casting dots of color across her walls. She stared at it, not smiling, not crying, just existing with it. Just letting the silence be kind for once. She picked up her phone. No messages. No missed calls. Nothing from her mother. But she didn't feel abandoned. Not tonight. She pulled Chloe's note off the mirror and read it again. Then she picked a cookie from the plate and took a bite. It tasted like cinnamon, butter, and something she hadn't known in years. Belonging. Later, she opened her journal. Christmas Eve. Alone, but not empty. I bought a tree today. I lit it just for me. And for the first time, it didn't feel selfish. It felt deserved. There was no dinner table. No gifts. No family waiting. But there was peace. And that's enough tonight. Merry Christmas, Emma. From someone who finally sees you. Winter break ended with a thick blanket of snow still clinging to Boston streets, as if the city itself had been frozen in time. Students returned in waves, dragging suitcases and catching up in loud clusters across campus. Chloe arrived 2 days after New Year's, hugged Emma tight, and offered her a late gift, warm wool gloves with little embroidered stars on the cuffs. Emma thanked her quietly. She wasn't used to receiving things. but she wore them every day after that. Classes resumed. Her new schedule was brutal: 5 courses, double shifts on weekends, and library hours in the evenings. But Emma didn't flinch. She had built her life on effort. If something broke, she learned how to tape it together. If something hurt, she worked through the pain. But one evening, in the middle of a snowstorm, everything cracked. It was a Sunday night, and the library was nearly empty. Emma stood behind the circulation desk, sorting the final pile of returns, when her phone buzzed on silent. She glanced at the screen. Unknown caller. She let it go to voicemail. Then it buzzed again. And again. A sick feeling crept into her stomach. On the 4th call, she answered. "Hello. Is this Emma Valdez?" The voice was female. Unfamiliar, but professional. "Yes. Who's this?" "I'm Nurse Mitchell from East Chelsea Medical. Your mother, Linda Valdez, was admitted an hour ago. She collapsed outside her apartment building. Mild hypothermia. Blood pressure unstable. You're listed as her emergency contact." Emma sat down without realizing it. "Is she okay?" "She's stable for now. We've moved her to a warm room and started 4 fluids. But she may need to stay overnight. Would you be able to come?" Emma looked out the window. Snow whirled like white sand across the glass. She was 30 miles away, her bank account nearly empty, and she had class in the morning. But there was no hesitation. "I'll be there," she said. The train ride to Chelsea was long and cold. Her breath fogged on the window as she stared out at the darkness. The gloves Chloe gave her kept her hands warm, but nothing could thaw the questions swirling inside her. What if this is just another incident? What if she doesn't want help? What if, this time, I can't fix her? When she reached the hospital, her boots were soaked, and her fingers stiff from gripping the subway railings. She gave her name at the front desk. The nurse led her to a small room on the 3rd floor. Dimly lit. Quiet. Linda Valdez lay on the hospital bed, face pale against the white sheets. And 4 drip hung from a pole beside her. She looked smaller than Emma remembered, thinner, older. Not just from time, but from neglect. When Emma stepped inside, her mother opened her eyes slowly. "Oh," she rasped. "You came." Emma swallowed the lump in her throat. "They called me." Linda scoffed weakly. "Of course. When they can't find anyone else, they call the daughter." Emma said nothing. She sat in the plastic chair beside the bed. The silence between them stretched like glass, fragile and tight. Then Linda turned toward her. "You know the radiator's been broken for weeks. Landlord didn't care. Figures. I slipped on the damn stairs." Emma clasped her hands in her lap. "You should have called me." "For what? So you could lecture me about gambling? Or remind me I ruined your life?" Emma shook her head slowly. "I wouldn't have lectured you." Linda narrowed her eyes. "Then what would you have said?" Emma looked down. Her voice came quiet, but firm. "That I'm tired, Mom. That I've been working 2 jobs and going to school full-time. That every month I send you money I don't have. And all I ever get in return is silence or blame." Her mother's lips twitched. "You think I wanted this?" she whispered. "You think I chose to be this kind of mother?" Emma didn't answer. Linda turned her face to the wall. "You don't know what it's like to be left. To have nothing. I was 23 when your father disappeared. Left me with a screaming toddler and a mountain of debt. I didn't know how to fight. So I escaped. One scratch ticket at a time." Emma's heart cracked. "I was the toddler," she whispered. The room went quiet. The 4 beeped softly. Eventually, Emma stood. "I'm going back," she said. "The nurses have my number. Let me know when you're discharged." Her mother didn't move. But just as Emma reached the door, she heard it. "Wait." She turned. Linda's voice was thinner than before, but different. "I'm sorry." Emma blinked. Not because she had heard the words, but because part of her had stopped believing they were even possible. Linda didn't look at her. She stared at the ceiling, tears in her eyes. "I don't know how to say things the right way, but I'm tired too. Of hating myself. Of watching you grow up afraid of me." Emma stepped closer. She didn't speak. She just reached out and gently touched her mother's hand. Cold. Shaky. But human. They stayed that way, hands barely touching, decades of distance shrinking in the silence. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was the beginning. 3 years passed. 3 long, quiet, complicated years. Emma graduated early, summa cum laude. With a degree in finance and a job offer from one of Boston's most respected investment firms. She moved into a small but sunlit apartment in Cambridge, traded her waitress apron for tailored suits, and replaced long shifts at the diner with client meetings and portfolio reviews. On paper, she was thriving. But there were still nights when she opened her desk drawer, pulled out the old letter from her mother, the one about the broken radiator, and read it as if trying to understand something she had missed. As if the space between the lines still held a meaning she wasn't yet brave enough to face. Her relationship with Linda had remained distant, though no longer silent. They spoke once a month. Sometimes less, usually short phone calls filled with awkward pauses and updates no one asked for. Emma didn't visit. Not until the call came. It was a Tuesday morning, cold and gray. When her phone rang at her desk, she answered absently, still scanning the numbers on her client's report. "Ms. Valdez? This is Dr. Farrow from Havenview Care in Worcester. Your mother was transferred here last month. Her health is stable, but she's asking for you. Room 213. Emma didn't respond at first. Not because she was shocked, but because she had already known this was coming. Aging had crept up on Linda. Diabetes, high blood pressure, and years of neglect had finally caught up. Emma had been paying the bills silently for over a year now, transferring funds when the government support fell short. She never told Linda. She didn't need thanks. But this? A request for her presence? That was new. The drive to Havenview was long and empty. She took the back roads, not out of convenience, but instinct. Trees flickered past in soft grays and browns. Branches bare against a sky that looked like it might weep. The nursing home sat at the edge of a quiet neighborhood where the sidewalks were too clean and the windows too still. Havenview Care. Emma parked slowly, hands tight on the steering wheel. She wasn't sure what she was walking into. Room 213 smelled faintly of lavender and antiseptic. The walls were cream, with framed paintings of birds and autumn leaves. A single bed stood by the window, a tray of uneaten pudding on the table, and in the corner, a folded wheelchair. Her mother sat in a cushioned chair, wrapped in a knitted shawl. She looked older, not just in the way that time carves lines into skin, but in the way eyes grow quieter. The spark of bitterness that had once defined her was now dimmed. When she looked up and saw Emma, she didn't react right away. Her lips parted, but no words came. Emma took a step forward. "Hi." Linda blinked. "You came." "I said I would." "I didn't think you still meant things like that." Emma set her purse down gently. "I don't say much these days unless I mean it." There was silence. Not tense. Just fragile. Linda motioned toward the second chair by the window. "Sit." Emma did. Outside, the trees were beginning to turn. Golden reds and oranges peeked through the gray. Linda watched the leaves for a long time. "Funny," she said finally. "This place. I used to think I'd die in that apartment. You know, alone, TV on, nobody knowing for days." Emma didn't answer. Linda continued, voice thinner now. "But here, it's quiet. I get food, people check on me, and there's this nurse, Anita. She likes to sing while she works. I hated it at first. But now it feels like music I never had in the house." Emma looked at her mother carefully. She didn't look like the woman who once threw plates or cursed her daughter for keeping change instead of handing it over. She looked small, breakable. "I used to hate you," Emma said suddenly. Quietly. Linda didn't flinch. "I know," she said. "I hated how you made me feel like love had to be earned. That I owed you for being born. That everything I did was never enough." "I know." Linda whispered again, voice shaking. "But I also hated myself," Emma continued, "for still wanting you to love me." Linda closed her eyes. "And then?" "I did," she said. "I always did." Emma's throat tightened. "You had a strange way of showing it. I didn't know how to be a mother, Emma. I barely knew how to be human." They sat in silence. And then Linda reached out her hand. Emma hesitated, then slowly placed hers in it. Her mother's hand was thin, dry, but warm. She squeezed gently. "I've watched you," Linda whispered. "They bring me your alumni newsletters. I saw the photo when you graduated. I tell the nurses, that's my daughter." Emma blinked fast. "I never knew if I'd get the chance," Linda said, "but if this is it. If this is the only moment I have left, I want you to know." She looked straight at Emma. "You are the best thing I ever did. And the only thing I didn't ruin." Tears welled up in Emma's eyes before she could stop them. Linda smiled, weak but real. "I'm proud of you, Emma. I always was. I just never said it right." Emma's heart cracked open. The ache of years of silence, neglect, longing, all of it surged forward. She leaned in, pressed her forehead gently against her mother's. "I'm still here," she whispered. And for the first time in her life, she felt like that was enough. Autumn in Worcester always came with a hush, leaves tumbling in soft spirals, winds brushing gently through empty streets, and sunlight dimming earlier each day like a candle reluctantly extinguishing itself. To anyone else, it might have felt like the end of something. But for Emma, it felt like the beginning. She visited room 213 every weekend now. Not out of obligation, and not out of guilt. But because something had changed. Something in both of them. They no longer danced around their past. They didn't pretend it hadn't been painful. But in the quiet hours over soup, shared puzzles, and slow walks through the facility garden, they began to reassemble what had once been broken. Piece by piece. Conversation by conversation. "I used to be so afraid you'd leave and never come back," Linda said one afternoon as she watered the small potted orchid by her windowsill. Emma smiled. "I used to be afraid you'd never ask me to stay." Linda chuckled softly, coughing a little. Guess we were both wrong. They had learned how to talk again, not as mother and daughter haunted by old ghosts, but as two women facing the same truth, that love sometimes survives in spite of everything. Even when it doesn't look the way it should. One Sunday morning in mid-October, Emma brought a photo album to the nursing home. It was a gift she had put together herself, scrapbook style, with old photographs she'd found buried in the back of drawers, scans of her college achievements, printouts of email exchanges from professors who praised her work. She sat beside her mother and turned each page slowly. "That's the day I got the internship," Emma explained, pointing to a picture of her standing beside a banner that read Women in Finance. Leadership Conference. Linda leaned closer. Her eyesight wasn't what it used to be, but she traced the outlines of the images like they were paintings. "I always wanted something like this," she murmured. "But I gave up early. Thought the world had already decided who I'd be." Emma closed the album for a moment. "You know, I used to think I had to become everything you weren't." Linda looked at her. "But now I think," Emma continued, "I just needed to become someone I could live with." Linda reached for her daughter's hand. "And I'm glad," she said, "that you didn't become me." There was no resentment in her voice. Only peace. In late October, Linda's health began to decline. Her blood pressure wavered dangerously. She grew more fatigued. Her appetite diminished. Doctors advised close monitoring, but Linda refused hospitalization. "I want to be here," she told Emma one afternoon as golden leaves danced past the window. "I want to be home. And now, this place feels like home. You made it that." Emma didn't argue. Instead, she adjusted the pillows behind her mother's back, covered her with the blanket, and sat quietly by her side. "I'm not afraid anymore," Linda said softly, her voice slow, but clear. Emma leaned forward. "Of what?" "Of dying. Of being forgotten. Of not being forgiven." Tears gathered behind Emma's eyes. "You're not forgotten, Mom." Linda gave her a faint smile. "You're not alone either," Emma added. "Not anymore." On November 1st, Linda passed away in her sleep. There was no pain. No machines. Just the slow, quiet release of a woman who had carried too much for too long. Emma was at her side. She had fallen asleep in the chair, her mother's hand resting in her palm. And when she woke to the stillness, she didn't panic. She simply sat up, kissed Linda's forehead, and whispered, "You can rest now." The funeral was small. A few nurses, a retired neighbor from Chelsea, Emma's friend Chloe, and Miss Harper, who had driven all the way from Boston. There were no long eulogies. Just a photograph, one single white lily. And Emma's voice. She was flawed. She was broken. But she was also strong in ways I didn't understand until I grew up. And she taught me, without meaning to, that you can rise even when the world keeps trying to bury you. She paused. And in the end, we found each other again. After the burial, Emma walked alone through the rows of trees outside the chapel. She breathed in the scent of earth, of cold wind and fading leaves. And for the first time in years, she felt light. Not because everything had healed perfectly, but because something had closed gently, without slamming shut. That evening, back in Cambridge, Emma unpacked the last box she had never dared open before. Inside was a single note, tucked into a torn envelope with no date. Her mother's handwriting. Emma, if I never say this while I'm alive, maybe you'll find this after. I was never good at showing love, but I never stopped loving you. And if you ever find a way to forgive me, I hope it brings you peace. Because you were always the best part of my life. I just didn't know how to say it. Mom. Emma read it twice, then folded it and placed it beside her degrees, where it would always stay. She didn't cry. She just stood quietly at the window, watching the last leaves fall. Autumn had ended, but something new was waiting. The days after Linda's funeral passed like slow-moving clouds, quiet, gray, and full of pauses Emma didn't quite know how to fill. She returned to her apartment in Cambridge and found that her life, on the surface, had not changed. Her job was still waiting. Meetings still filled her calendar. Clients still expected answers. The world, as always, kept turning. But something inside her had shifted. Not like a collapse. More like an unlocking. And in the space where years of pain and tension once lived, something softer had begun to bloom. Not joy. Not yet. But permission. Permission to feel, to grieve, to be. Emma sat at her desk one Saturday morning, the sun spilling across the hardwood floor like liquid gold. She hadn't opened her laptop. She hadn't checked her phone. Instead, she held a pen in her hand and stared at a blank page in her leather-bound journal. She hadn't written since her mother's passing. Not properly. Just scribbled to-do lists and numbers on receipts. But today, she felt the pull, the deep, silent urge to put something into words before it collapsed inside her. She began to write. Dear Emma, it's been 1 week since the woman who broke you said the words you waited a lifetime to hear. And it wasn't too late. Not for her. And not for you. You've spent so many years carrying things that were never yours. Her shame, her silence, her anger, her sadness. You thought love had to hurt, that it had to be earned. That if you gave enough of yourself, maybe someone would see you. But you were already enough. You've survived more than most people ever will. You gave even when you were empty. You forgave long before you received an apology. And when the moment finally came, you didn't run. You stayed. And you let love in. That takes more strength than anything else. So here's what I want you to remember. You are not what happened to you. You are what you chose to become afterward. And I am so proud of you. Emma. She set the pen down. Her hand was trembling slightly, but her breath felt deeper than it had in weeks. This was how healing began, not with dramatic gestures, but with quiet truth spoken to oneself. Later that evening, Emma walked to the riverfront near Harvard Square. It had become her place of reflection over the years. The Charles River, dark and steady, always gave her the illusion of stillness, even when her life felt like a storm. She stood by the railing, wrapped in a wool coat, scarf snug around her neck. The cold was sharp, but refreshing. She watched the ripples in the water and thought of her mother. Not the version who yelled or slammed doors. Not the version who forgot birthdays or burned dinners in drunken rages. But the version who whispered, "You're the best thing I didn't ruin." That version was real too. Maybe small, maybe late, but real. And Emma chose to hold on to that part. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small folded card, the final letter her mother had written, the one she found in the old box after the funeral. She didn't read it again. She just held it, letting the paper warm in her palm. Then she tore it gently into 3 neat pieces and dropped them into the river. Not to forget, but to release. To say, "You don't have to carry this anymore." When she returned home, the apartment felt warmer than usual, though the heat hadn't kicked in yet. She lit a candle on the windowsill. And for the first time in her life, she wrote another letter, not to herself, not to her mother, but to the girl she used to be. To the girl who grew up alone in a noisy house. You made it out. You found a way through the silence, through the hunger, through the nights when it felt like no one would ever see you. And I see you now. I'll never forget what it cost. But I'll spend the rest of my life honoring the fact that you never gave up. You are not forgotten. You are not unloved. You are me. And we're home. She folded the letter and placed it in the back of her journal. No stamp. No address. But it had reached its destination. Right in the heart of her healing. The email came on a Thursday afternoon. Buried between budget reports and client updates. Subject: Women in Finance, Alumni Roundtable Invitation. From BU Career Development Office. Emma clicked it out of habit. Dear Ms. Emma Valdez, we are pleased to invite you to be a guest speaker at our upcoming Women in Finance Roundtable at Boston University. Your journey and success as an alumna have inspired many students. We would be honored if you could share your story with our current class. Date: November 18th, Friday. Location: BU Alumni Hall. Dinner and networking to follow. She leaned back in her office chair, staring at the screen. She had spoken at panels before. She had presented to CEOs and investment boards. But this felt different. This was home in a way. The place where she built herself from scratch. The place where she first believed she might be more than a girl from a run-down apartment with too many secrets. Emma replied, "Thank you for the invitation. I'll be there." She sat still after hitting send. And then, without realizing, she smiled. The night of the event, she stood in front of her bedroom mirror, adjusting the sleeves of her navy blue dress. It was sleek, minimal, and sharp, just like her. Her hair was pinned back, and a subtle silver necklace glinted at her collarbone. She hadn't worn it in years. It had been a gift from Miss Harper, her high school English teacher, just before graduation. For when you start walking into rooms you once thought were too big for you. Emma had walked into a lot of those rooms since then. But this dinner, felt like reclaiming the very first step. BU Alumni Hall buzzed with the kind of warm noise that comes from old stories and new beginnings. Faculty members mingled with recent grads. Current students took photos with name tags slightly askew, and waiters moved between tables with wine and hors d'oeuvres. Emma was greeted at the door by a program coordinator who handed her a folder with her name in gold script. She scanned the guest list. A few familiar names. Some mentors. Some strangers. And then one that made her blink. Harper Elizabeth, guest of honor, faculty emerita. Emma's breath caught. She hadn't seen her since her sophomore year. A few moments later, the event began. Emma took her seat on the small stage, alongside 3 other alumni from the finance world, each impressive in their own right. The moderator introduced them one by one, then turned to her. And finally, Emma Valdez, graduate of the class of 20XX, summa cum laude, and now a portfolio advisor at Carter & Wells. Emma, your story has resonated with many of our students. What advice would you give to someone who comes from less traditional beginnings? Emma paused, microphone in hand. The room was silent. She looked across the audience, rows of young women with bright eyes and quiet fears. She could see her old self in the 3rd row, in the way one student nervously clutched a pen, ready to write down the next big thing. And then she spoke. I used to believe success was about outrunning your past, but I've learned it's more about making peace with it. I grew up in a home that was complicated. My mother struggled with addiction. I worked 2 jobs through college. I often felt invisible, like I had to earn the right to take up space. But every day I chose to keep going. Not to prove anyone wrong, but to prove myself right. You don't need a perfect past to build a powerful future. You just need to believe that you deserve to arrive. Silence again. Then applause. The kind that doesn't explode but builds like warmth spreading in waves. After the panel, Emma stepped down from the stage and headed toward the back of the hall, heart still steady. That's when she saw her. Miss Harper. Standing near the coffee table, her silver hair swept back in a bun. Glasses perched low on her nose, and that same proud smile Emma had once longed to earn. They locked eyes. Miss Harper, Emma said, voice cracking more than she expected. The woman turned. And for the first time in a decade, Emma was enveloped in a hug that smelled of lavender and old books. I knew you'd shine, Miss Harper whispered into her ear. But I didn't expect you'd glow. Emma held on a second longer, burying her face briefly in the woman's shoulder. You saved me, she whispered back. You gave me the first yes. Miss Harper leaned back, holding her shoulders. No, my dear. You gave yourself the first yes. I just made sure you saw it. That night, Emma returned home late. She placed her folder from the event on the kitchen table, changed out of her heels, and poured a cup of tea. She opened her journal. Tonight, I walked back into the place that once made me feel like I didn't belong. And I didn't just stand there. I spoke. I shared. I offered a hand to someone else at the starting line. There's power in being the person you once needed. And tonight, I became her. The ivory envelope arrived in early spring, buried beneath a week's worth of client statements and neatly clipped utility bills. Emma recognized the handwriting before she even saw the return address. Ava Chen. She smiled before opening it. Inside, a gold-rimmed wedding invitation printed on thick, matte cardstock. Ava Chen and Daniel Morales joyfully invite you to celebrate their marriage. Saturday, April 22nd, 4 p.m. Brookline Arboretum, Massachusetts. At the bottom, in a different ink and unmistakably Ava's handwriting, was a note. Emma, you have to come. No excuses. I reserved a seat right by the cherry blossoms just for you. I even checked, it's far enough from the dance floor if you feel like hiding. Winking face. Can't wait to see you. Love, A. Emma traced the edge of the card with her thumb. Ava had been her only real friend back in high school, the only one who ever tried to pull her out of her shell. And Emma had resisted. Over and over again, too ashamed of her mother, her poverty, her bruised life. But Ava had never stopped trying. And somehow, without fanfare, they had stayed connected. Now Ava was getting married. And she wanted Emma there. That meant something. The wedding day was crisp and sun-kissed, the kind of early spring warmth that feels borrowed from summer. Emma arrived early, wearing a soft sage-green dress and simple pearl earrings. Her hair was curled gently at the ends. Chloe had insisted on helping the night before. The Brookline Arboretum was breathtaking. Rows of cherry blossoms stretched in full bloom, a pale pink canopy swaying in the breeze. Laughter bubbled in the air. Children darted between benches. Violinists played soft classical music near the altar. Emma stood at the edge of it all, taking it in. A woman who had once grown up afraid of joy was now learning to stand in the middle of it. Ava spotted her from across the crowd and rushed over in her satin robe, bouquet in hand. Emma, she cried. You're really here. Emma laughed as she hugged her. I told you I'd come. Ava stepped back, eyes shimmering. You look amazing, she said. Like someone who finally lets herself show up. Emma smiled. I'm working on it. Ava squeezed her hands. Thank you for being part of today. It means the world to me. No, Emma said softly. Thank you for always seeing me, even when I didn't see myself. Ava gave her a look only longtime friends share, a blend of memory, pain, and gratitude. You've always been worth seeing, she said. The ceremony was beautiful. Vows were spoken beneath the blossom trees. Promises exchanged with trembling voices and gentle laughter. Emma sat near the aisle, watching as Ava beamed at her husband. Her eyes filled with the kind of peace that Emma had once thought was only for other people. As the crowd applauded and the couple kissed, Emma felt her heart swell. Not with envy, but with hope. Because maybe love, real love, gentle love, wasn't just for other people. Maybe it was for girls like her too. At the reception, Emma stayed mostly at her table, sipping sparkling water and watching the dancing from a comfortable distance. Until Ava appeared again, this time in her reception dress, cheeks flushed from laughter. "Hey," she said, pulling up a chair. "So, rumor has it you're still single." Emma smirked. "Are you assigning me homework again?" Ava shrugged. "Not homework. Just nudging. When was the last time you let someone in?" Emma looked at her glass, then out at the people dancing beneath twinkling lights. "I let someone in once," she said. "She was hard to love. But I'm glad I didn't give up on her." Ava tilted her head. "Your mom." Emma nodded. "She told me I was the only thing she didn't ruin," she whispered. And in that moment, I forgave everything. Ava reached across and squeezed her hand. "I'm proud of you." Emma met her eyes. "I'm learning to be proud of me, too." Later, as the music slowed and the crowd thinned, Emma stepped out into the garden alone. The air smelled of jasmine and champagne. Petals floated gently to the grass. She pulled out her phone and opened the Notes app. She typed one sentence. "One day, I'll fall in love without fear." Then she tucked the phone away. Because tonight was not about what she lacked. It was about what she'd reclaimed. She had shown up. She had smiled. She had stayed. And beneath a sky full of stars and blossoms, she whispered into the night, "I'm still here." And finally, that felt like enough. The box had been sitting in the back of Emma's bedroom closet for almost a year. She had placed it there after the funeral, unsure whether she was ready to face what it held. It had come from the nursing home, sealed in clear tape, marked "Personal Belongings of Linda Valdez." The handwriting wasn't her mother's. Just a nurse doing her job. Emma hadn't touched it since. But something changed after Ava's wedding. Maybe it was the tenderness of that day. Or the note she'd typed under the cherry blossoms, "One day, I'll fall in love without fear." Maybe it was just time. Because now, one quiet Saturday morning, with the rain tapping gently at the window, Emma sat on her bedroom floor with the box in front of her. She peeled back the tape slowly, reverently. The lid creaked open, and she breathed in memories. The first layer held simple things: a sweater her mother always wore, faded lilac with 2 missing buttons, a cheap tin of mints, a half-finished crossword puzzle torn from a magazine, her mother's old reading glasses, slightly bent at one hinge. Then underneath, wrapped in a scarf, was a smaller shoebox. Emma lifted it out carefully and opened it. Inside were photographs. Dozens of them. Most were printed from old film rolls, grainy, underexposed, full of the rich, muted colors of a decade-long past. Some were Polaroids, yellowing at the edges. Emma stared at them, stunned. She had no idea these existed. One by one, she sifted through them. A picture of her as a baby on the kitchen counter, wrapped in a pink towel. Her mother standing behind her, laughing mid-blink, hair pulled into a messy ponytail. A snapshot of 5-year-old Emma asleep on the couch, clutching a stuffed rabbit. The timestamp in the corner read 3:02 a.m. A school photo of Emma at age 7, missing front teeth and grinning. More pictures followed. Emma reading at the window. Emma playing with a neighborhood dog. Emma blowing out candles on a cake that looked store-bought but sweet. Some of the photos she didn't even remember being taken. Her mother had watched her. Even when Emma thought she wasn't looking. Even when the words never came, the photos did. Proof that Linda saw her. Proof that she cared, in the way she could. Near the bottom of the box, Emma found a manila envelope unsealed. Inside was a folded letter, written in her mother's unmistakable scrawl. "Emma, if you're reading this, I'm probably gone. I don't know what kind of mother I was. I have guesses. Not many of them are good. I yelled too much, drank too much, gambled everything away, and asked you to carry the weight of it all. But you were the one thing I never deserved and somehow still got. And God, you were good. I kept those photos because I was afraid to lose pieces of you. I couldn't say the right words. I didn't know how to hug without hurting. But every time you smiled, I felt like maybe I hadn't failed completely. If I had one wish left, it would be to go back and tell you how proud I was. Every day. I hope you found peace, Emma. I hope you found someone who sees you. And I hope, one day, you forgive me not because I deserve it, but because you deserve to let go. Love. Mom. Emma didn't cry right away. She sat still for a long time, the letter in her lap, the rain still whispering against the window pane. Then she gathered all the photographs and laid them across the floor. A timeline of a mother and daughter separated by wounds, misunderstandings, silence, but stitched together in some secret way. By love. Not perfect. Not always safe. But real. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. That evening, Emma went to a nearby craft store and bought a photo album, leather-bound, sturdy, with golden edges. She spent hours arranging the pictures inside. On the first page, she glued a copy of her mother's letter. On the last page, she wrote, "She didn't teach me how to love, but she taught me why it matters to try. This is our story. Not the pretty version. The real one. And it still led me here." She closed the album gently, then placed it on her bookshelf, beside her diplomas. Because this, too, was an accomplishment. Surviving. Healing. Remembering. Letting go. The apartment was small, but the light poured in like it belonged there. Emma stood by the open window of her new place on the third floor of a brownstone in Somerville, with a cup of tea in one hand and a soft breeze teasing her hair. Outside, spring was fully blooming. Magnolia trees reached toward the sky in pastel bursts. Birds chirped over the hum of distant traffic. It wasn't much, but it was hers. Every piece of furniture in the apartment had been handpicked over time, no longer donated, borrowed, or left behind. The couch was a pale blue velvet, curved gently like a smile. The kitchen table, rescued from a flea market, now held a small vase of fresh tulips. Books lined the shelves, not only on finance but poetry, memoirs, and even children's literature. And on the mantel, next to a framed quote that read, "You are allowed to outgrow the versions of you that survived," sat a single photo. Emma at 10 years old, grinning up at the camera with peanut butter on her chin. Beside her, her mother, mid-laugh, eyes crinkled, holding a hand above Emma's head as if shielding her from the sun. Emma had chosen that photo on purpose. Not to forget the pain, but to remember the tenderness that had existed underneath it. She hadn't spoken those words, "I forgive you," out loud to her mother before she passed. But now, she whispered them into mornings like this one. Into clean laundry, warm mugs, and open windows. Into silence that was finally safe. That afternoon, she met Chloe for lunch at a little place near Davis Square. Over salads and too many refills of iced tea, Chloe leaned in and grinned. "You know what I realized," she said. "You've lived more lives by 25 than most people do in a lifetime." Emma smirked. "Not sure that's a compliment." "It is," Chloe insisted. "You're like a whole forest that grew back after fire." Emma chuckled. "A really tired forest." "But strong," Chloe said. "And peaceful." Emma grew quiet, then nodded. "Yeah," she said. "For the first time. I think I actually am." That evening, Emma returned home and did something she'd never done before. She lit a candle on her kitchen table, cooked herself dinner slowly, set 2 plates. Not because anyone was coming, but because she wanted to practice what it would feel like to welcome love into a space she had built on her own terms. Afterward, she wrote in her journal, "I always thought home was something you waited to be given, but maybe it's something you give to yourself first. This place, this peace, this light, it's mine. Not borrowed. Not temporary. Mine. And one day, when someone kind sits across from me and says, 'Tell me about your childhood,' I'll smile and say it was hard. But I'll also say, I grew out of it like a tree through concrete. And I made something better. I made a home. My own kind of home." That night, before turning in, Emma opened the window again and breathed in the scent of jasmine. She looked around her apartment, not grand, not lavish, but filled with peace, and whispered, "You'd be proud of me, Mom." And in her heart, she heard the reply, "I always was." The rain was soft but steady, painting the streets of Cambridge in a shimmering gloss. Emma ducked into the cozy corner bookstore on Massachusetts Avenue, grateful for the warmth and quiet after a long day. The familiar scent of paper and polished wood wrapped around her like an old friend. She ran her fingers along the spines of books, savoring the titles, the promise of stories waiting to be told. As she reached for a volume of poetry, she heard a voice behind her. Good choice. Emily Dickinson has a way of making silence sing. Emma turned and found herself looking into kind, dark eyes framed by soft curls. The man smiled, a little shy, a little genuine. Do you come here often? He asked, gesturing to the rows of books. Emma chuckled softly. More than I probably should. He laughed. Me too. His name was Daniel. A writer, new to Boston, looking for inspiration and a place to call home. They talked for a while about favorite authors, childhood dreams, the way rain can sometimes feel like a blessing instead of a curse. Emma felt a warmth she hadn't known she was missing. For the first time in a long time, she didn't want to hide. They exchanged numbers beneath the soft glow of the reading lamp, a promise to meet again, a chance for something new. As she stepped back into the rain, Emma smiled. Love without apologies was no longer a distant dream. It was beginning. The morning sun filtered through the large windows of the neighborhood cafe where Emma agreed to meet Daniel for coffee. The scent of fresh espresso mingled with the chatter of early risers and the soft hum of jazz playing overhead. It was a quiet place, away from the rush of city life. Perfect for conversations that lingered longer than usual. Emma arrived first, settling into a corner table with her laptop and a book. The hours at work had been intense, but here, with a steaming cup in hand, she felt a rare moment of calm. Daniel appeared moments later, carrying 2 mugs and a shy smile. Sorry I'm late, he said, sliding into the seat across from her. No worries, Emma replied, her smile genuine. I needed the coffee anyway. They talked about everything and nothing, their favorite childhood books, the challenges of moving to a new city, the small things that made life feel worth living. Daniel shared stories of his family back in Vermont. Emma spoke cautiously about her past, revealing pieces she usually kept locked away. You've been through a lot, Daniel said gently, his eyes never leaving hers. But you carry it with such grace. Emma looked down, stirring her coffee. I'm still learning. Some days are harder than others. He reached out, his hand covering hers. You don't have to carry it alone. For the first time in a long time, Emma allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, love could be a refuge, not a burden. The days grew longer, but the memories sometimes loomed darker. Emma found herself battling moments when old fears surfaced, when the weight of her past threatened to dim the new light she was embracing. One evening, as rain tapped gently against the windows of her apartment, she sat curled on the couch, the photo album from her mother resting on her lap. The faces in those pictures smiled back at her, frozen moments of love and struggle intertwined. Her phone buzzed softly. A message from Daniel. Want to take a walk? The rain stopped. She hesitated, then typed back, I'm coming. Outside, the city smelled fresh and alive. They walked side by side along the Charles River, the sky clearing to reveal stars blinking through thinning clouds. Daniel stopped and looked at her. You're brave, he said. More than you realize. Emma smiled wistfully. Sometimes I forget. He took her hand gently. We all have shadows, he said. But there's always light if we're willing to look. She squeezed his hand, feeling that light spread through her chest. For the first time, she believed it could last. Spring was blossoming everywhere, flowers in window boxes, laughter spilling from cafes, the scent of fresh rain on sidewalks. Emma's world felt like it was finally settling into a rhythm, with Daniel's gentle presence as a comforting constant. But life, as she had learned, had a way of throwing storms when least expected. One morning, Emma received a phone call from the social worker at Havenview Care. Ms. Valdez, we need to discuss your mother's recent medical tests. There's some concern about cognitive decline, and we're recommending a full evaluation. Emma's heart tightened. She hadn't expected this. Not now. The weight of responsibility pressed down again, heavier than before. Later that evening, Emma and Daniel sat across from each other in her small kitchen, the news still settling between them. "I'm scared," she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. Daniel reached out, his hand covering hers. "We'll face it together." Emma nodded, grateful yet overwhelmed. The shadows of her past had stretched into her present once more, but this time, she wasn't alone. Together, they would weather the unexpected storms. The gentle hum of the morning sun filtering through the curtains was a soft promise of hope. Emma sat by her mother's bedside at Havenview Care, holding Linda's frail hand with a tenderness born of years of struggle and forgiveness. Though the diagnosis was daunting, Emma found strength in the small victories, the moments when her mother's eyes would brighten with recognition, the faint smile that tugged at her lips, the soft squeeze of her hand when Emma's voice was near. Outside, the world bloomed anew. Cherry blossoms dotted the path outside the window, and birds sang songs of resilience. Emma leaned in and whispered, "We're in this together, Mom." Always. For the first time. She truly believed that the past, no matter how painful, was just the beginning of everything that could still be. A new chapter. A new life. A new beginning.